It's been 1 year since I decided to focus on myself, so here's what I learned. Some of you may know last year I studied abroad in South Korea, and I feel like I talk about this a lot on my channel or just in general, but it's genuinely because it was the most transformative experience of my life. I don't think that I could have done something better at a better time in my life. So 1 year ago today, from the time that you were watching this video, I got back from Korea, and it's also been 1 year since I decided to pour just about all of my energy into myself and obviously the people around me. There were so many bumps along the way. I mean, like, I was met with so much unknown about myself. I thought that in Korea I knew everything about myself. I thought that before Korea I knew everything about myself, but when I came back from Korea, I realized that I was in this unknown. Like, I knew nothing about myself. I feel like I was set back so far that every effort that I had tried to make in the past 3 years of my life, removed, gone. It just was a failure. There's something called the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is essentially the idea that we think that we know it all, but once we realize that we don't know it all, we sort of become afraid of what we don't know, and it discourages us from figuring out what we don't know. Our confidence is most high when we feel like we know everything about a topic. But for me, I feel like the peak of that graph was when I was in Korea. I thought that I knew everything there was to know about myself. But once I was given the freedom from the person suppressing me for so long, and I had to learn how to be me again, and I had to figure out how to be me again, I realized that I was actually in the stomach of the graph. I had feelings of, wow, there's so much that I don't know about myself. And when someone would ask me what kind of music I liked, what movies I liked, what shows I liked, I kid you not, I could not tell them. There was not a single original thing about me. Everything about me was adopted from that person. All the shows that I watched, all the music I listened to, all of the movies I watched was all perfectly picked by that person. The only unique thing about me was that my favorite color was green, because everybody's favorite color was pink or purple or blue, and mine was green. People only recognized this because I showed it through my room, through the clothes that I wore, the accessories that I wore. So it wasn't hard to tell. People didn't even have to get to know me to know what my favorite color was. Like, that's the color of my bag. You didn't need to know me to know what my favorite color was. I was kind of a canvas for the color. My favorite songs were that of my partner. I didn't venture out and try new music. I didn't introduce any new music to my partner because most of the times they just didn't like it anyway. And I didn't watch any new shows, any new movies, unless they were offered by my partner at the time. I was very much in this headspace where everything that I liked and everything that I did was not my own. That everything was shared with this other person. I didn't have a single independent quality. So once I was removed from the person that was blocking me from finding out who I really was, and I began listening to new genres, and I surrounded myself with people who love and care about me, and people who evoke curiosity in me, that dip felt so huge. And even though now I'm so grateful for that, when I was in the moment, the stomach was just, I literally felt like I was facing a world of unknown. I'm so grateful that I have the most amazing people around me, and I don't know what I would have done without them. But surely, at the beginning, I literally felt like learning about myself was an impossible task to take on. Now, here's the issue with the Dunning-Kruger effect, though. The Dunning-Kruger effect, or the analogy, tends to pertain to something that you can eventually become an expert on. For example, if you're in your undergrad, you might reach the peak. If you do your master's, you sort of get into that stomach of like, wow, there's actually so much that I didn't know about this topic. And once you complete your master's, and let's say you move on to your PhD, you then get to the peak on the right side of the graph where you're like, okay, I actually know a lot about this, and you're confident in this because you've spent so much time learning about it. But I feel like for us as people, we're constantly growing, that we may never reach that peak on the farthest right side of the graph because we're constantly growing as people. There's no expert stage, right? The questions I had about myself at the beginning of this journey were very much like, who am I without them? What do I like without them? What do I dislike without them? What are my own hobbies? These were things that I approached with fear, and I approached with anxiety, because I really didn't know what it was like to be my own person. Because even though I had spent 17 years of my life before dating this person, I should say, because I was friends with this person since I was 12 years old, so they were in a big part of my life growing up. But I didn't really know what it would be like, Because even though, again, I grew up for 17 years by myself, I never ventured into my own mind, and I never ventured out and to figure out different things about me. That was just not a thing that I did. And I was so young, so I didn't think about doing that. But these were questions that I had. And I feel like I approached these things with such fear, and I asked these questions with such anxiety because I was the extension of somebody for so long. Like, I was literally the parasite and they were the host. Like, I didn't know who I would be. It felt impossible. But the biggest change that I want to mention is that all of those questions that I once approached with fear are now reshaped and have answers. My questions have been reshaped to: what don't I know about myself? Who am I when I'm with the people that I love? And what are some new things and new people that I can learn to love? Some people believe that in order to love themselves, they have to change. I would argue that loving yourself is the change. Learning to accept yourself for who you are and not chameleoning for other people. The second that someone else enters your life, that's the change. That's what matters. So now I can tell you with confidence that my favorite song of all time, and this will never change, is Hopelessly Devoted to You from the movie Grease, sang by Olivia Newton-John. And it's also my go-to karaoke song, and I sang this every single time I did karaoke in Korea. And even though I know that I've loved this movie for forever, I was always afraid of admitting that that was my favorite song because my partner at the time would find that to be like cringy. So instead I would just say that I never had a favorite song. And within this year, I've learned that the greatest things in my life aren't whether or not I'm sharing it with a partner. The greatest things in my life aren't a partner. It's the fact that I'm sharing my life in general. That's what really matters. With family, with friends, people who are my rock, people I can count on, people I can call for a 7 a.m. hike, people I can call on just to shop for the day, people I can call on to scrapbook, people I can call just to come over my house and hang out for a little bit, people I can call on to go fishing. These are the people that matter. These are the people that are worth sharing my life with. Having a partner does not change that. The reciprocation that I have in my friendships, that's what matters. And I always thought that there was a certain level of love that I can only get from a partner, but it actually turns out that I've reached that with my family, that I've reached that with my friends, and I'm satisfied and I'm fulfilled. I still find myself wondering about a future partner though, and I catch myself because I have to remind myself that my purpose in life isn't to be someone's other half, because I'm not half of a couple, I'm a whole person, and I must explore that. And I think that's my purpose in life, is to explore myself, because who else am I working for? So in my exploration over this past year, I discovered I love yoga. I love moving my body in new ways. I go to Pilates. Of course, there's yoga. I go on hikes now, and I do calm walks at night around my area. And I realized how much I enjoy reading before bed. And I realized the genres of books that I like. And I feel no shame in liking romance books. I'm able to tell you now how many hours of sleep I get uninterrupted by thoughts or stress. It is 6 on average. And I've realized that my memory has gotten a lot better. I don't know about anybody else who has been in a similar situation, but my memory sucked when I was in this relationship with this person. It could have been either from the gaslighting or just because my brain was always on fight or flight, so I just couldn't remember anything. But now I remember everything. It's like I've unlocked a new part of my brain, and like all these neural pathways are being developed and they're just growing. Like I didn't know I had this part of my brain. It's honestly crazy. And I recently finished this book called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson. And in this book, Manson describes the most vivid before and after period of his life. In the book, he describes it as pre and post tragedy because it was the person that passed away in his life. He considers it pre-death and post-death. My before was definitely before Korea, before deciding to leave my partner, and the after is, of course, after that and where I am now. And I don't think that I give myself enough credit for how I handled that. And for a long time, whenever I would tell people about my story and what happened and just the situation at large, people would tell me that I am God's strongest soldier because I went through so much in the last 10 days of me being in Korea that so many people tell me that they don't know how they would have done it. I've been told that they would have, I don't even know if I could say this on YouTube, but they would have gone to prison for the things that they would have done to their partner if they found out what I found out. I was left in another country with a partner that had visited me there after 4 months of being separated just to find out that he cheated on me, and I had to stay there with him. I had a week left with him there, and I had to make sure that he got home safe because he didn't know his way around the country. I'm sure it was traumatic for him. Of course it was traumatic for him. There's There's no doubt about it. But your actions have consequences, babe. So I don't feel too bad. In the before period of my life, I honestly don't remember much. Me saying that my memory's so great. My brain didn't retain much while I was in the relationship. And I think that it was just from being suppressed so much and being gaslighted and, or gaslit, and from having such high cortisol levels. Like, my brain just couldn't keep up. My brain couldn't grab my long-term memories from my lovely neocortex and hippocampus. I don't remember much of who I was. And I think that's because I don't think there really was a me. I was the extension of someone else. I was the amalgamation of someone else's interests and hobbies. I was like the personification of it because I adopted everything from that other person. But I may not remember the specifics of myself, but I remember the way that I felt. Accidental rhyme. Thank you, amygdala, for remembering all the emotions. I just remember feeling like I couldn't breathe when I woke up in the morning. I remember feeling like there was always a weight on my chest, and I wasn't walking on eggshells, I was tiptoeing. I remember me and this person would FaceTime every single night before bed for, honestly, it could have been a year. It could have been longer. I don't know. But we became so codependent, like even in our sleep. Like, that's why I got such bad sleep, because there would be times where I would wake up in the middle of the night to the FaceTime ending, and that sound would trigger me, and I just couldn't fall asleep because I would be thinking about they ended the call because they're upset. I'm going to wake up in the morning and I'm going to be ignored and I'm going to get the silent treatment. I would fall asleep after hearing that sound, and it was like I was Pavlov dogged. You know what I mean? Like, I was sort of conditioned with that sound to mean anger, that I would be met with anger. Like, even to this day, when I hear the sound of a FaceTime call ending, I have to take a second. It was that bad. He would end the call, and then I would text him and say, like, why'd you end the call? And then he'd say something like, you know what you did. And I'm like, I have not a clue. But every time a FaceTime call ended, I was usually met with anger because he wanted me around 24/7. And so again, I was conditioned to believe that a FaceTime call ending meant that the person that I was on call with was angry. So it wasn't until I was in Korea where I was finally able to breathe, where I was finally able to wake up in the morning and take a deep, fulfilling, satisfying breath. One that filled up my lungs all the way till it hurt. Like, it was honestly horrible. And I think the only reason why I was really able to do that in Korea was because I had a 13-hour time difference, or like a 14-hour time difference. My nights was his days were my nights. I could escape him for a little bit, you know? That was like my first taste of freedom. And it wasn't until, I decided to leave the relationship that I really reaped the benefits of taking those deep and clarifying breaths that I now do daily. Thank you, yoga. I was just watching videos of myself on Snapchat because I was looking for a clip for a TikTok. Haha, I know, I'm so original. And you could see the stress in my body. You could see the weight that I had retained because I was so stressed. I've gone through some really bad times where I have just neglected eating, and it never turned into anything serious. It was usually just because I would want to rot on my bed and read or try and escape what was going on in my head. So I would just neglect eating until it went away. But because I was in this relationship, my cortisol levels were constantly high because there was no end in sight. There was no end. And I would constantly eat and I would constantly snack. There was no progression of getting better in the future in my head. Like, there was no, like, this was going to be the rest of my life. I barely slept. I had an increased appetite. My metabolism was so extremely slow. You can see it in my older videos. Like, if you watch older videos of me, you could see how much weight and like water my face held, like even just around my jawline. Gaining and losing weight is only a problem if it's done in an unhealthy way. But in the after period of my life, when I got back home, the weight was kind of just sliding off of me. I was eating better. I was more active. I had a great support system that helped me get back on track. I started yoga and I was meditating often. I really took care of my mental health. I was in therapy, and I will say that no shame. Like, I know some people have shame around saying that they're in therapy, but there's no shame around it. Not a single ounce. I feel like our bodies are a reflection of our minds. So when your mental is not good, your body's not going to be good, and you're going to feel it and you're going to see it. Nails, hair, skin, weight. Like, that kind of thing just is a reflection. You know how people say your room is a reflection of your mind? And oftentimes, if your room is a mess, people will assume that your brain's a mess because it is a reflection. I think the same thing goes for your body. I would constantly have bags under my eyes because of the poor sleep that I got. And mind you, I've always had pretty bad sleep. I still have bad sleep to this day, but having even worse sleep than the already bad sleep that I had was just astronomically bad for my mental health and just for my body in general. I would wake up every single day exhausted and not looking forward to moving on in the day. Like, it was so bad. I would bite my nails until they bled, until there was basically no nail left on my fingers because I was under so much stress. And I think, to move on from that, I think healing and recovering is a never-ending process. I think there will always be things in my life that I will have to heal from because there's so many uncertainties in life. Like, I can't guarantee that I'm going to be happy my entire life. I can't guarantee that my support system will stay the same my entire life. And so, God forbid something happens, I'm going to need to heal and recover from certain things. But the more and more that I go through things, or the more that I'm introspective and reflect, the more I garner these tools to approach the situations differently, and I learn how to handle the next thing better. And I think we as people, we tend to look at other people and other people's happiness and think, why can't this be me? But what we really need to understand is that, number one, people are really good at masking their emotions, like really good, especially men, because society suppresses men and suppresses men's emotions. Also because social media is literally a highlight reel. And I want to exclude TikTok from this because TikTok tends to reward any video that's posted on that app. Regardless, like, you could be crying because you got cheated on, or crying because you stubbed your toe in a wall, and you'll get millions of views, but that same thing won't fly on, like, Twitter or YouTube Shorts, for example. People don't want to see you hermiting on your bed or bed rotting because people don't care about your mundane life. People want to see your extravagant, extraordinary life to escape from their own mundane life. And it's a constant cycle of us wishing and hoping and thinking that there are things that we need to not have a mundane life. But truth is, everyone has a mundane life. That's just another thing I learned this year, is that everybody is ordinary. And I also read about it in The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. Nobody is different from anybody else. Just because you make more money, just because you have a higher social status, just because you have 1 million followers on TikTok, does not make you different from anybody else. You are not extraordinary. And I say this with love, because the second that we start creating this hierarchy of who's better than who, that's the same second that you get depressed and you wish that you were those people that you place so much importance on. You wish that you were the people that you place on a pedestal, but you have the ability to not place people on a pedestal. So why do we put people on a pedestal? Everybody is mundane. Everybody's ordinary. Nobody's better than the next. And we need to live by that, because that will make everybody so much happier. And social media has exacerbated this idea and has really propagated this idea that you are in a hierarchy and that the amount of likes that you get on Instagram is what makes you a better person. And people wonder why there's this uprise of anxiety diagnoses and depression diagnoses. And it's because of social media. My parents will always bring up, and this is just, of course, just my set of parents, I can't generalize that, but just to give some anecdotal evidence, they'll say, growing up, nobody was really anxious or nobody was like really depressed. Yeah, of course people had anxiety, but there was no awareness around it also, which is a problem in of itself. But people have so much anxiety because everything is posted online. And I'm getting so far away from the topic of this video, but you staring at other people and comparing yourself is attributing to the reason why you're not happy. And another thing that I learned in this past year, to kind of just loop it back to the original topic of the video, is that social media and I don't click. We don't really go well together. I've added limits to all of my social media apps. I give myself 2 hours a day on each app, and that's all I let myself get. Because when I start indulging in the doom scrolling and I start looking at all these people's extraordinary lives, it makes me feel like I'm not doing enough with my life. And I love social media and I love creating content and I love posting content, but I really limit the amount that I consume for that reason. So that's another thing that I learned in the after part of, the post tragedy, is that social media is the silent killer of our mental health. And I think that this part of my life, Korea, will stick with me until the end of my time. And that's because my before and after period was so vivid. It was right at the beginning of my adulthood. And this part of my life will stick with me until the end of my time, because it was my before and after. Right at the beginning of my adulthood, I was 20. it was perfect timing because now I can move forward and I have my whole 20s to look forward to. Arguably the most important decade of all of our lives. And now I can do it without tiptoeing over those eggshells. And now I can do it without watching over my shoulder. And now I can do it without worrying if the person that I'm texting on Instagram will be approved by my partner. So I'm making this video because, well, it's therapeutic, but also just to show you that everything does get better. And when we pour energy into ourselves and into the people who love us and reciprocate, that's all you need. Pouring energy into yourself could never go to waste. And you should build on those hobbies, build those connections, pick up that instrument, learn a new skill, try different hair colors, nail colors, nail lengths, nail shapes. Test out a different fashion style, and never let anybody take away your individuality and your independence, because those are fundamental pieces of you. And if someone doesn't like those parts of you, then they don't like you. There's no need to mold yourself into somebody else for somebody else. We're all shapes, but you can't turn me into a circle when I'm a square. You know those little like games that we would play where you're trying to like shove the block into the shape? You know what I'm talking about. That's all I have to say today though. Happy 1 year to me. Happy 1 year to locking the fuck in and figuring out who I am and doing things that I previously have missed out on. Shout out healthy friendships and a healthy relationship with my family. You are the greatest project that you could ever and will ever work on, and you aren't put on this earth. You weren't put on this earth to save other people from themselves. What did Harry Styles say? Fill up your own cup and let people fall in love with the overflow. Yeah. Do that. Allow yourself to be a fountain of love that's overflowing, and let the people in your life fall in love with that version of you. That's all I have for today. I'll see you soon. Mwah. Bye.